the servants of Jesus Christ, to all the saints in Christ Jesus which are at Philippi, with the bishops and deacons. Grace be unto you, and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making requests with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ, even as it is meet for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my bonds and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, ye all are partakers of my grace. Chapter 1, verse 8. For God is my record, how greatly I long after you all in the bowels of Jesus Christ. And this I pray, that your love may abound yet more and more in knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent, that ye may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of righteousness, which are by Jesus Christ, unto the glory and praise of God. Dear Heavenly Father, would you thank you for the opportunity to come together and look at this book of Philippians tonight, and it's the things you have to say, not just to the Philippians, but to us also, in the issues of having that heart of a servant, Lord. We give you praise and thanks in all things. In your name, amen. So again, that's really the theme, or one of the themes in the book here is that issue of servitude and not wanting to be the greatest. And you see that in the book. They apparently were getting things done, because he says, make sure you're getting things done. What does he say? Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. When I read that, it tells me that things were getting done, but they were fighting. So everybody wanted to be the guy. Everybody wanted to be in charge. Everybody wanted to be get the credit. And we saw last time he addresses this to all the saints in Christ Jesus which are at Philippi, with the bishops and deacons. So he's talking to everybody. The other thing that tells me is the bishops and deacons weren't doing their job. Because if the bishops and deacons had been doing their job, he wouldn't have had to write the letter. The strife and whatnot that was going on in there, they should have corrected. It was probably, it was them too, I'm sure. And the other thing we want to understand about that is they had, and we're going to look at this tonight, they had a local assembly set up. They had people that were in it, they had bishops, they had deacons, they had it set up. And one thing, so often, you'll see Paul will give you the basic way a church, a local assembly should be made up, but he doesn't give you specifics, because everything's going to be different. Every place where a local assembly is will have a different setup than at other places. You go to a Grace Church, it's been around, there's one in Chicago, it's been around 100 years now. And they've had a setup and an organization for years, and they're set up as a really what you would look at it to see as a traditional church on any Baptist church on the street corner.
And that works for them.
Well, yeah, and they're much larger. Us, we don't really have that structure in our local assembly. I mean, if we did, everybody that was there would be a bishop or a deacon, because of how small we are. And that's okay. But one of the examples that I've heard, which I thought was very interesting, and I heard it about back in Chicago. There were two mega churches back there, so forgetting that, but there were two churches that were out involved in the community. And they went and they talked to the leaders of those two churches. And the churches were set up completely different. They're just, local community churches. And they talked to them. One was from a very affluent area of Chicago. One was from a very workmanlike, very blue-collar area. And so they talked to these two pastors. And the one pastor from the very blue-collar one, he said, yeah, we just we stand up, we make some decisions, and we just delegate. We say, this is what we decided as a board to do. We want you to do this, and you to do that, and you do that, and you do that, and they go out and they do it, and they're effective at it. Because that congregation is used to that. That's the world that they live in, and it works. The one from the very wealthy side of town, just the opposite. The bishops and deacons come together, decide, the elder board, however they describe themselves, they decide where the direction they want the church to go, and then they bring these other people in, and they have meetings about it, and people kind of delegate to themselves, because that's the world that they live in. And you know what? It works effectively in both. But you got to know your local assembly. And so, again, Paul gives you a basic outline for how a local assembly should look, and it's the organization, and the fact that it should have an organization, but he doesn't say specifically you do it this way or down the road. The other thing is, these churches do tend to be self-governing. Paul would go into a big territory, he would set up a church and then expect them to plant other churches. But there's never this issue of having oversight, really.
For a lot of
Not having oversight. Paul kind of had the care of the churches, but not in a setup like we are.
like some religions are today. There's corporate office or whatever that you're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Denominational.
the denominational
structure.
hierarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, have you guys seen? You guys should drive up to Seattle, and about a third of the way up there's the huge headquarters of Seventh Day Adventist, and it's just headquarters, and it's it's not like Nike, but it's big like Nike.
Well, the
Wow.
Southern Baptist is probably more than that.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know that was
But you're right. In Grace, there's not really this hierarchy, is there?
what is what's the verse that John uses for his church?
Keepers of your joy.
Yeah, but what is the it's
Is it
Corinthians?
it's Corinthians?
I'm looking for a verse I hadn't. Anyhow,
Your joy.
yeah, John's church down in San Capistrano, their website is, not that we have dominion over your faith, but are helpers of your joy, and that's really what we're supposed to be. When we go down, or I go down to San Juan Capistrano or back to Chicago or spend time with those guys, they never say, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. They'll give me their advice on what they've done that's worked or what hasn't worked, or I may ask them. But never have I gotten that phone call saying, okay, you guys are in trouble, you need to report back to the main office.
Right.
If anything, they'll say, it's just the opposite. Hey, this is going on, what would you do? And it's a different setup. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have authority either, because sometimes it means accountability is an issue. And he tells you, you got to be careful, and you got to stay in the doctrine. Go read the books of Timothy, and he's over and over, stay in the doctrine, stay in the doctrine, stay in the doctrine. So what I thought we could do is just, I want to look at these titles here of the bishops and the deacons, because he does kind of give a job description for them. So if you would, come with me over to... where do I want to go first? Let's come over to 1 Timothy. First Timothy chapter 3. And we got to remember when that list letter is being written to Timothy, it's because he's back in Ephesus trying to get things put like they were. So chapter 3, verse 1 of 1 Timothy. This is a true saying, and if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. So the first thing is, I want you to see, and this is shocking to a lot of people. What is in that verse? Who decides to be the bishop?
Themselves.
Yeah, it's not God maneuvering a person to be that. There's that issue. You guys have probably heard this, but I love this story. There's this issue out there. Well, how did you get called into the ministry? I got called because Corey bugged me until I finally wore down and accidentally said yes one day. But you heard the old story. The guy goes, and the young preacher goes before the elder board, and they say, "Well, tell us about your calling." He says, "Well, I was out plowing corn, and I looked up in the sky, and the clouds said GPC." And I said, "Well, I must have meant go preach Christ." One of the old guys on the elder board looks at him and goes, "Son, I've heard you're preaching. I think you missed a sign. I think it was go plow corn." Oh, I'm sure it's a made-up story, but my point is, God's not manipulating the events to put to. There's not a group of people that God has called to be ministers.
Right.
God called to be bishops. It's interesting that I'm here because when I signed up for Grade School of the Bible, I'm walking out of the cafeteria at the conference. I say, "Hey, Richard, why don't you give me one of your applications for Grade School of the Bible?" And I go, "Richard, I got no desire to teach." And he looks at me, totally discounted what I said, gave me some advice about how to teach, and here I am. But it was nothing I ever set out to. The other part of this is, and this is what gets
People come to it differently.
exactly, and what gets missed in this: if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work, and I don't do the things that Richard does, or John does, or the pastor of the local I don't do the things any pastor does. I don't really have the care of the flock. I mean, people come to me sometimes, and I'll sit down and talk to them. But you know, when I have done it, I've always told April, man, I don't know how these guys do it that have 100 people in their congregation, and people come to them, and I don't really have that on my plate. And the other thing I told April, it'd be tough to know what was going on, then give a message and be look out and you know, that's one thing Richard always said. He said, don't. Well, he says it in Grade School of the Bible when he's talking to the preachers. He says, don't ever teach to a person. He says, if I ever find out you teach to a person, then you will get the phone call from me.
He mentions Dick quite often, sitting right in front of
Oh
him.
yeah.
He picks
Don't
on him.
get up in front of somebody and know something that's going on out there, and then preach your whole lesson to that person.
Oh, yeah.
Might be-
He
No,
says
he's not.
it's not fair to that. No, Dick's one of the guys there. It's not fair to the person. It's not fair to the other people. And the converse is true though. If you ever get done with a message and somebody comes up to you and says, "Man, do you know what's going on?" or what, then you know you did it right. You know, when you convicted somebody. But it's talking about here. It's a good work. It's a lot of work, and I don't have that part of it. And you know, everybody seems to go want to be the guy because they think it's going to be really neat and really cool. But it's a lot of work, and people need to understand that there's a lot of work.
But aren't they supposed to receive a double portion? I mean, they're supposed to be able to make a living.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's not enough grace, at least maybe in Chicago, but I mean here, you couldn't make a living as a preacher, a grace preacher.
No, I that I'm aware of. I know of very few that support their. I think most grace ministers that I'm aware of have a job.
But it's supposed to be. I mean, I know Paul worked, but he said that
Yeah.
the flock should care. I mean, they shouldn't have to work a job.
No, but again, like Paul said, like we were talking earlier, it depends on the congregation, on the size of the assembly.
And their
You know.
attitude, look at Corinthians where he said, I'm not going to have it be said that you supported me because you're not behaving yourselves.
Right.
I mean, that's a
And
kind of a loose way to explain it, but that's what I got.
and you know, Shorewood supports too, because there's Alex.
Right.
But there's also Grace School of the Bible there too, and there's
Yeah.
a worldwide. That's a worldwide thing there. But you know, and I think, and I know one other church down in the south where they do, and I think other places do. I never got into it for the money.
But it can
Just
also,
neat.
you know, you can be controlled if, you know, if you have a church that, you know, you start depending on people's money. That's the way Satanists take over churches,
Mhm.
is they just go in and they, you know, give lots of money and then make the preacher or the pastor dependent upon them,
Mm.
and then it's like you start making the, you know, pressuring to make the changes, and you can't say what
Oh,
you want to
exactly.
say.
When we first set up Grace Berean Bible Church, you know, April's the treasurer, but I never look at the checks. If I open that thing and I'll grab it and fold it and give it to her. I don't want to know whose name's on that check. I don't want any. It's first of all, it's none of my business. Second of all, I don't want to know, because I don't even want to. I don't want to change anything, even if I do it by accident. And so again, to your point, it's right. You can become very beholding very, very fast. Now again, to your point, yeah, if a pastor could ultimately make a living, and I don't mean be rich, but make a living doing it, that's always the best. I mean, Richard can study 80 hours a week.
Yeah, I
You
think
know?
Les Feldick has that type of ministry, but
He does now, but you know, he was a farmer.
yeah,
He was a farmer, and I've just heard that, you know, with him getting to the point where he is an age, his organization, and I don't know what it is, whatever that organization is, it might be just he and his wife. They're very pleased that now raises enough money that after he passes away, it will be able to continue on, because he, you know, everybody pays to be on TV. You don't get paid to be on, but that is self-sufficient ministry now, and it is. It becomes a very, very interesting. But you're right, Grace. Yeah, that there are not, and you know. But I think a lot of these, just forget the Grace message for a minute. Just your little local Baptist church, you know, unaffiliated community churches on the corners. You know, how much can they be providing for? I know a lot of even those kinds of preachers are like high school teachers, or part time. Maybe they're a real estate agent, something they can do part time. Because if you got 60 or 75 regular people that are given to the church, and you got to support the building, and their kid might need braces one week.
Well, that's where it goes back to being a gracious giver too. It's not like back in Israel with the temple where they were given, the 10% and the church could count on what was coming in. The way a church today is set up is with a gracious giver. So like you're saying, some weeks, a certain amount would come in, as another week another amount, but it's hard for then the pastor to be relying on that because it's never set in stone.
It really is, and that's why you get, especially people amongst the group that doesn't rightly divide, you get the tithing speeches. Yes. Because they got a church to support, the building, plus they have their own livelihood. I mean, I've watched Dean struggle with these issues. Dean that was his job. He was and I don't begrudge anybody if it's their job as a pastor. Now, that's totally fine. But when things fell apart for him and he got kicked out of his church, he didn't have that. But his church was 4 couples, 4 families.
The new church.
When he was at the new church. When he was he's in Hepner. I mean, if everybody, wouldn't help him out a whole lot. But when he was at the Assemblies of God, he had his salary, and plus he had his house because he lived in the parsonage. Well, when he left his salary, and he left his house. So he had to replace his income plus his housing, and he'd been a minister for 30 years. He didn't have other skills.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's not like he could just go out and swing a hammer or be a mechanic or whatever. So don't. That's one thing to think about. It's very easy to say, how come these pastors don't get it? And right or wrong, it's wrong. Let me just put it that way. But it's a little different for those of us that aren't supported by a ministry to come to see Right Division and get in full feet versus somebody who knows, okay, if I do this, I lose my income. and that's hard. I had a slow day at work today. First time in 4 years I've had a slow day, and I call it, is it going to be okay? Are we going to make it? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? By the end of the day, I was just as busy as I've been for every day for the last 4 years, but that's just a few hours.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, and the guy, and so again, does that mean they shouldn't come to see Right Division? No, but we need to understand the reality of where a minister who's paid to be, that's his job, is. That doesn't excuse him or anything. And the other thing too is, you don't want to look at the mega churches. Mega churches are different beasts. Those guys, for the most part, I don't have my thing to say, but for the most part, those guys are they're making a good income. They're preaching a denominational message, not a biblical message, and not even the Joel Osteens, but the guys at 1,000 churches. But I feel for the guys in the local corner. I was lucky. I mean, I started teaching, but I already had a job, and I don't know. I don't know that I'd ever want to be paid because I don't know. I have some other things to do, like you're going to see here in a couple of weeks, and you can't do that. That's the other thing too.
Yeah.
You can't do. If you're paid to be a pastor, you need to be a pastor. And Richard's been very blessed in that his assembly has allowed him to travel, and they've made that part of their outreach.
He's kind of the hub.
Yeah,
and then
and
everything else is there's just not enough grace believers.
Right.
In
the
U.S. anyway.
And to know the history of that too. I mean, it's funny too. When they first started doing when he first got to Chicago 30 years ago, and they first started doing conferences, he'd do all 8. He'd show up and he would be the only teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. Or maybe he'd get out here to Chicago, to San Juan Capistrano, and John would do one. Or Bill Walker's father-in-law would do one. But he would do them all. And so it's taken 30 years to get this group. And I'm actually not the youngest group. There's another group below me that's starting to get real active over in the Middle America. I was making a point about that. Oh, yeah, he's the hub. And he goes out as a representative of Grace School of the Bible. Now, he is obviously Shorewood, but he goes out with the authority, if I can put it that way, of Grace School of the Bible, not Shorewood Bible Church, but Shorewood Bible Church allows him to go and Alex will be out here, so Alex comes out. But that's part of that ministry, and that ministry goes back to J.C. O'Hare. J.C. O'Hare conferences. Yeah. And that's the church that Richard is part of. So, anyhow, a person's a bishop because they desire the office of it, and it's work, and he desireth a good work. Verse 2. A bishop then must be blameless. Not perfect, but blameless. They want a bunch of people pointing at him saying, oh, he's got this and he's got this and he needs to, when I was going to the first church of the Nazarene, the pastor was Gary Hennicky. Guy, I just loved him. When I got to know him a little bit, I'd go to summer school with him or whatever they call it, Bible camp. And it turns out I found out he and his wife, they were wine connoisseurs. They didn't like to get drunk, but they enjoyed the wine. But it was something that was very private that they kept, and they didn't do it publicly because of a verse like this. That issue of, if somebody sees you, it doesn't look good. So that's what they're talking about there. The husband and one wife. This becomes a big issue. We had somebody at the old church show up and wanted to know what we thought about that. And I always just took it to be, you're married to one person. Well, he took it to be that you couldn't have been divorced, because Bill Walker was divorced. He was married like a year, and then there's no remnants of that marriage. But he was married to Deb Walker, his wife, and we had no problem with him being on the elder board. Some people have taken this to mean that he has to be a husband. He can't be a single guy. Well, that's an interesting.
I always thought it was polygamy.
Yeah,
That's what I thought too.
That's always been my understanding. That's always been my.
God set up marriage between one man and one wife,
right?
And that's how I take it too. Is just you're married to one person.
Yeah. If I got the question, what does that mean? I'd say you can only have one.
Well, I understand that polygamy was in the Roman Empire. It was common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if he, it says that a husband has to care for his wife. I mean, if a man's married, he has to care for the needs of his wife. Well, if you have two, how are you going to care for the church?
Exactly.
Or three.
Exactly.
Or
I question the wisdom of a man with more than one wife. Enough said.
Plus, since Jesus' ministry, he made it clear that one husband, one wife was what God intended from the beginning.
Yeah, so you had to,
Think about that too. Lord Jesus Christ was single. Paul, by all accounts, by the time he became a grace preacher, was single. He was probably married at one point, but he says later on that he wishes people were like me. And he was, I don't know if he fits the definition of an elder, but he definitely had authority. and he was divorced, she died, whatever. But he was single. Now we're gonna see a verse in a little bit that we'll revisit this and we'll go,
Okay.
Well, that does put that in a little different light. But I agree that I take it to be polygamy. Vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine. It's interesting. He says sober earlier and then not given to wine here. So the sober's not drunk. He's a serious guy.
Yeah.
He can have a sense of humor. Doesn't mean he's not any fun, but he's serious about his
Sober
business.
thinking.
Yeah. You guys have probably seen all the grace preachers. You can get Richard or John or me or any of the guys talking about and having a great time about stuff. But when it turns to the scriptures, it does tend to get much more sober, much more serious. And we have fun with it, but we understand, okay, it's work time. And we're sober, we're serious about it. Not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre. Well, that'd strike a lot of people. That would strike a lot of people. Most of the guys are on Sunday mornings. It would strike them.
What's filthy lucre? Is that
That's dirty money. Greedy.
Okay.
They're just. If you got $800,000 in your church safe, that's probably that's filthy lucre. Not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? So let me ask you something. A guy's single. Think about what we just talked about with the husband and one wife. If a guy's single and doesn't have any kids, he can't rule his house. And is ruling the house the learning ground where you learn to rule the church by the way you rule? So then maybe it does mean you have to be
I
married.
kind of think so.
I think it does.
Do too.
Because people who haven't had children yet or haven't had to run a household don't understand.
Okay. So let me get this real personal with you guys. You guys don't know. What about David Bush?
Who's David?
David Bush was an elder at the church,
See, I
and
think
he wrote all
I
kinds
don't
of
know if
books.
he has all the characters needed to run a church. That someone that was married.
Yeah.
would.
It's
had a
interesting.
family.
It's interesting. We had attacks on this verse at our church from all different ways. If you want, we had a guy that was single. We had a guy that'd been divorced and remarried, and everything. But
I kind of think
yeah,
he's a one wife and a family man. Or at least has responsibilities at a house. And
I think you're right. Given
from what this
I think
says.
you're right. Given the opportunity. And so then I go back and I think about the where we are right now, Philippi. Not we're in Timothy now, but that church in Philippi was probably the ladies down at the water, the Philippian jailer in his house, and then whoever they would have brought. There's a good chance it was mainly women in that church. That Philippian jailer, he's the only male that's identified. So they wouldn't have been able to set up that whole issue. But we are in the letter to the Philippians, he does say to the elders and bishops, to the bishops and deacons rather. So they did have that assembly. So there is an order to it, and I think I think ultimately you're right. I think
How many
it does.
years later is this? From the Philippian jailer incident.
Yeah,
Like
well, it would have been 20 or 30
30
years
years,
because
yeah.
Timothy's late. Right, exactly. And he's not writing about Timothy. He's not writing about Philippi to Timothy. He's writing about Ephesus. But you extract that in Philippi, we see they were faithful from the very beginning. So that organization might have been set up before he left. So as we
it's just interesting. In 5, it talks about rule and taking care, and I think you get those that experience from a home.
one thing, and I wish I hadn't mentioned his name, but I have. But I love David Bush. I've come to see some things with his doctrine that I disagreed with. But David Bush and I were very good friends. Now that I've said his name about 4 times, just in case you missed it. But yeah, I would agree with that. He did. There was a part that of relationships that he didn't have because he didn't have that fatherly. That fatherly, and you could see sometimes when things came up, he maybe had a little heavier hand than a lot of the rest of us because we all had kids, and I think there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Patience.
So in this, what's curious to me is who's this written to? It's like, who makes the decision? How does if a man desires the office of a bishop? I think that's what it's.
Well, you're right.
So do the existing bishops decide that there's an empty office, and they decide that this person meets these
Yeah, or a group
qualifications?
or a group comes together like what's happened to me and say, "Would you teach?"
Okay.
That's
So,
what
but I
happened.
mean, at some point, somebody could say, "Well, wait a minute, he's a striker."
Sure. No, that's the issue. Go back to blameless.
Right.
Blameless. Yeah.
So at some point, there's like a debate amongst the existing bishops and deacons as to who to add.
If there are existing bishops and deacons.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now the next one we're going to see. There's somebody that's going to teach at our church, and he and I have talked about this. He's not ready to be put in that, and I take the bishop to be maybe the position. I think the bishop normally is the guy that talks. And I know I don't
Apt to teach.
Yeah, apt to teach. I think the guy that gets up usually is identified as a pastor. I mean, a pastor's not Paul's word. Bishop is. Do I consider do I want anybody to call me Bishop Dave? No, no.
Deacon Dave?
No. None of that.
Big
None,
D.
none of that. But I think what you see here is you see some issues of leadership, and one of the next one here is verse 6. Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. And I tell you, that's very easy. You want somebody that's grounded in the doctrine, but hasn't come to it in the last 6 months, year. The local assembly can decide what's the appropriate time. Maybe you all come to see it, but you got one guy that likes to teach, and he says, "Yeah, I'll teach." So he's a novice, but everybody's a novice, right? So again, like I said, Paul doesn't give you these hard and fast rules. But I know the gentleman that's going to come down and teach, he'd like to teach more, but he needs more seasoning. He needs to be in the doctrine, prove that he understands the doctrine, but also be able to lead, not experience the highs and lows. One of the things at a church I used to go to is the teacher, the pastor teacher, probably didn't have quite enough life experience to be able to deal with some situations.
Are you talking about like what April was talking about, like not having kids and
Well, not that, but he was a very young person. He had a family and everything, but he was just young and hadn't experienced some of the life experiences that some of the rest of us had.
right.
And it's tough. I mean, you're raising 3 little kids.
Yeah.
You have a full-time, very stressful job, and then the rest of the time, if you're not dealing with your family or your job, you're trying to study to teach. One of the things that if that falls by the wayside sometime is that ability to deal with things on a mature level. And I think that's one of the reasons why things didn't go well. Some of those life issues hadn't come up. Now, we're not talking about experience-based Christianity. We don't base our Christianity based on our experiences, but our experiences do leave an impression on us. And you learn how to deal with people. Again, if you can learn to deal with your children, you can learn to deal with the church.
And so Timothy, and it's just very ironic because Timothy is young and he's evidently not married.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have any kids.
He was a leader of a church, huh?
Yeah.
Well, what was he though? What was his
hands
position?
were laid on him.
Was he a bishop
Yeah,
or
so
maybe
there
he was
was
just
still-
a deacon?
Hands were laid on by the
At that time.
presbytery. That's his ordination. That would be what we call an ordination.
Right.
Was he a deacon now?
Well, no, he was. I wouldn't. He was. Most people would identify him as the bishop of Ephesus. I don't know that that's in the Bible, but Paul sent him places to put things in order. He was kind of Paul's right hand.
Right. See, to me,
Troubleshooter.
Yeah, troubleshooter, corrector, fixer. And he was in Ephesus for a while, but he went to more. He also went to Corinth, and he told the Corinthians. He told Timothy, "Don't let people give you a hard time because you're young." And what he's telling Timothy is, he's not telling Timothy that, well, if somebody mocks you or makes fun of you because you're young, go deal with that person. While that would be true, he's telling Timothy he needs to comport himself in a certain way. Don't run around like a young man. And all those the lusts and whatnot that comes with it, right? Don't let people speak evil of your youth. But he tells the Corinthians the same thing. He says, make sure you take care of him. Don't just because he's young doesn't mean he doesn't come in authority. So the issue there is that noviceness, though. There's a guy, and I don't know his history, but there's a guy there's some 18, 19, 20-year-olds now that are coming out of grade school of the Bible.
wow, that's good.
Yeah, and you know what? By the time they get to be 23 or 24 or 25, a couple of them had their churches on the internet. It's kind of neat. There are people that need a teacher, and he's a teacher, and they can't all get together. They get together a little bit, but a lot of what he does happens to be at night. And when he's 24 or 25 or 26, he'll have a lot more experience than I did at 40. And those things matter. And the reason too about not being not a novice. And he said all the stuff I just said is not the reason he says that. He says, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. And, I've said it before. To teach, you have to have an ego. Everyone wants to say, well, he's meek and doesn't have an ego. To get up in front of people, I don't care if it's 10 people or 100 people or 10,000 people. You got to have an ego. You got to have some confidence that you can stand up and have something to say. And then you get people come back and you get the haters, but you get the people come and say, "Wow, that's great, that's just awesome." And you get, I feel pretty good about myself, and you start to think it's about you, and you got to be careful because it's not about you; it's about the message.
You're just the deliverer.
You're just a deliverer. You look over at Job 41. Because he said, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Job 41 and verse 34. Speaking of the devil. Job 41, verse 34. It says, speaking of the devil, he beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. Pride's an evil thing, and it'll get in. And that's why you got to have somebody that's not a novice. He's grounded in that doctrine, and the doctrine works out in him so that he understands the issues of the doctrine, not the person. Even like what Paul says, I'm the apostle of the Gentiles. I magnify mine office.
Got to be able to speak boldly.
Exactly, but you got to be able to do it without thinking it's about you.
Right.
What do you think about, to fight pride, because it's kind of like when you tell yourself, don't think about this, don't think about, and then course, that's what comes into your mind.
Hey, yeah.
So what about, like, with pride, if you just start to mock yourself, just like, you're so ridiculous.
Yeah. Then you're going down that issue of oh, wretched man that I am. It becomes very interesting because I want people to tell me that I do a good job teaching, not so much because of my ego, but it feeds my ego. But I don't want people to humor me. I don't want people to waste their time. I don't want people to go through all the work that we go through to go down to Woodburn on Sunday morning and do all that if people are just putting the time in or just humoring me. I want it to have value to people. So then that becomes the balance. Okay, the positive feedback is great, but why do I want the positive feedback? To feed my ego? Or to just confirm that, yes, I'm on the right path and people are getting something out of it and to continue on. Because while, yes, it can feed an ego, it can also be the encouragement a person needs. Because sometimes, honestly, sometimes it's a little drudgery.
I didn't say that in terms of you.
No, I know.
Just thinking of.
I understand.
I think I tried it last night. I'm like.
The thing
To beat yourself up and see how it went.
Here's my answer to that is prayer. My answer to that is when I have those thoughts. Okay, I've got a conference I'm speaking at, and I want to do good at conferences because I enjoy speaking at conferences. I like that. That's fun for me. So I start having those thoughts. It's just prayer, and the prayer is just while I'm driving around. God, I'm getting a little puffed up here. Maybe my motives aren't as pure as they should be. I'm aware of it. Help me to remember that the issue is what your word says, not what I say. Not how well I read the verse. I am not the world's greatest speaker. I get that. I'm never going to have an audience of 10,000. I'm not even going to have an audience of 100. I'm lucky if I get 12, of which 3 are me. But for the people that are listening, I want it to be an impact because that's the whole point of doing the thing. And you want to, and yes, it helps to be able to get up there with confidence and say, okay, this is going to be a good day. And there are days when you're teaching and I'm up there and I'm going, this is a train wreck. And we get in the car, and everybody goes, man, that was the best lesson you ever given.
Always.
And and there'll be times up there,
Always.
and I'm going, man, this is great. I'm thinking, wow, my home run. She gets in the car and goes, what was that? Did you not study this week?
So true. That happened to me on my YouTube channel. I do an update and I thought it was fantastic. And Jeff would be like, something was wrong with you.
Or
And I'd be
he'd
like, that was a bomb.
complaining how
Yeah,
bad
that
it was, and I'm
great.
like, that was the best one you've ever done.
Yeah.
It is absolutely true.
It's funny.
That's why you get back and you got to focus on the word.
Yeah.
You got to focus on the word. Verse 7.
7 of what?
1 Timothy 3.
We're back to 1 Timothy
Yeah.
3. 1 Timothy. Yeah, we just jumped off of Philippians, went on 1 Timothy 3.
Got about 10 minutes.
Okay. And then we're going to go through this list, and then at the end it's going to be kind of like, I don't know if any of you golf, but when you go golf, bend your knees, athletic stance, arms straight back, follow through, keep your eye on the ball, breathe, keep your back spine, rotate on your spine, and so you think about this, and the last instruction, just forget all that and go have fun. So there's all these instructions, and they're important. But the other thing is, make sure you're doing this in such a way that you're edifying. This does not become a list of do's and don'ts, commands that, Verse 7, moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without. That's an interesting, continue on. Lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. That's an interesting one. You got to be blameless. That's inside the local assembly. Make sure you're a good example to what's going on there. But even from without. Don't let people from without say, hey, I saw your pastor. I saw your, how come you're doing, and that can manifest itself in all kinds of different
Or if
ways.
they have dirt on you, then they
wanna
can
be-
blackmail you.
Oh,
Be
yeah.
a snare.
That's right.
Yeah.
They can control you.
Yeah, good point.
Absolutely.
Or they can make up stuff too.
Yeah. Everybody's got a past. I don't. Lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. And to me that kind of is the issues where Paul tells Timothy, don't be ashamed of me. Because, it's one of these, your leader's in jail.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, So, how do you balance that one? The people that were without the church, they certainly didn't look at Paul like he was a hero.
That's true.
But they could have looked at Timothy, and how did Timothy respond to the situation? Because
Was Timothy ever in jail? I wasn't ever clear. Because sometimes he'll say Paul and Timothy to such and such a place.
I don't know
I think
that.
he was with him when he was in jail.
He just went and helped him. Huh?
Yeah, I think he ministered to him.
I would think so. I couldn't picture that, how that really read. Because he would.
It seems like they always went after Paul, like in one of the cities that we studied.
Yeah.
Paul had to take off. Everybody else stayed, and it was like they just wanted Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of truth to that. Cut off the head and the cut off the shepherd and the flock will scatter. Okay, verse 8.
Okay.
Now we're going to move over to the deacons. Likewise, must the deacons be grave, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience, not double-tongued. That's an interesting one. Not backstabbing, not speaking out of both sides of your mouth, being true to the doctrine. You see, I tell you, just from personal experience, towards the end, where the church I used to go to, I was on the elder board, and people would come to me and say, "Well, do you agree with what the pastor said?" I actually knew that was probably the beginning of the end, because
There's a little trap there.
well, yeah, that's not fair to that's not fair. And fair is maybe not the right word to use, but to anybody.
Right.
To anybody, and so the person that's asking you that question, now they're playing out they're confused, because one guy's saying the guy that's speaking is saying one thing, the guy that has some authority is saying, well, no, a different thing. If I give an answer that's disagreeing, I'm undercutting, and you can't have that.
That's a talebearer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You also can't
God
have somebody
hates that.
running down, gossip. Oh, did you hear what happened to so and so at church?
Yeah.
Did you hear what happened to so and so? Yeah, God, that's not my kid. Ooh, their kid's not as good. They look perfect, but they're not. Not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. Holding the mystery of the faith. They got to be true to the doctrine. Got to be true to the doctrine. There is such a temptation, especially on churches. I use church local assembly that are small, to get in a hurry to have bishops and deacons and get all the people in place. I ended up being an elder where I was before because I needed somebody to teach the kids, and to be on the kids, they figured as a reward or whatever, if you'll teach the kids, we'll put you on the elder board. Oh, okay, that's cool. I was not prepared. I was not. But that happens. That's why we're a year now. We don't really have that set up, because if we need it, we can just come together real quick and talk about whatever we're going to do. We're not doing a whole lot right now. But just the teaching down there. But sometimes people, the local assembly will get in such a hurry to get some kind of a authority level or these offices set up, that they'll put somebody that maybe doesn't have the doctrinal foundation that they need in that position. That's why we haven't been in a hurry. That's why I'm a little nervous about being gone, only because I know everybody's relatively new to the message, and it doesn't mean everybody has to be in lockstep with me. I mean, I hope everybody's not in lockstep with every single thing I say. We want to be able to free think and have discussions about it, be Bereans about it. But at the same time, it's nice to have somebody that can step in with no worries and just go ahead and teach, or if a question comes up, it can be addressed and whatnot. So that's the other thing. That's why we will not probably have an organization real quick, because we got to be sure. We got to be right. And
then if you have to remove somebody, then
right.
that creates bad feelings.
Yeah, and that can become an issue. Then the other thing too is, how do you do it?
Yeah.
How do you remove, if you have 3 people on an elder board? How do you remove one? So
I've always assumed that these are fairly big organizations.
Oh, I exactly.
I mean, there's elders.
Exactly.
It's plural.
Exactly.
There's got to be probably at least 50 people.
Yeah.
What are they overseeing? I mean, they're overseers. They're rulers of something. Well, there's got to be something to rule.
One thing too, and this is shame on us, really, is one thing about these local assemblies. They're set up to be out in the communities, and we're not. We show up on Sundays. We show up. I mean, you are more, probably, you and Bill probably are more than anybody, but this is a good organization to go out and evangelize, and we don't do a lot of that. I mean, and I can give you a bunch of reasons why we don't, but none of them are any good. But yeah, I agree with you. A church like us, for us to spend all our time and energy trying to figure out how to have a church of bishops and a church of, or a board of bishops and a board of deacons or elders or whatever you want to call them.
Too small.
It's too small. Exactly. Everybody would be doing everything anyhow, and you know what? We already are.
How big is John Verstegen's?
He's probably 35 to 50 on. Yeah.
So that's about big enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Any smaller than that, you know, we were probably 20 up there, and we had a bit. You know, that was really 4 families, and
wow.
and 4 families and 5 families maybe, and there was a representative of each family on the board. You know,
That's
so
tough.
you know who's really got it tough is Rick Church in Arizona.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
because
big.
well, in wintertime it is.
Oh.
But he says he's and they've had the discussion. You have to be a full-time resident to be on their boards down there.
Right.
They will take all your work and all your. You are 100%. They don't have a membership role, but you're 100% member of that church. But if you're going to be on in a leadership position, you can't be a snowbird. Which I mean, it's obvious when you right,
Yeah.
but
It's
that
not
is
listed there.
It's not listed, right? But
It's kind of implied.
But that is an issue for a church in the South. You know,
Yeah.
especially in Phoenix, where their population doubles, sometimes triples. So, but the big thing there is holding the mystery of the faith in your pure conscience, and I think that's really where you got to test somebody and make sure that they understand
Yeah.
the doctrine, understand all the things. You know, he doesn't just say the doctrine; he says the mystery of the faith. He's bringing your eyes to something.
You gotta hold it.
And let these also first be proved. Test them. Now you're not attacking them, but you're testing them. Do you have an understanding of the doctrine? Can you give us the 4 basics or whatever? Do you understand that Paul is your apostle? That Peter is not? Do you understand where the church started in mid-Acts, not in Acts 2 or worse yet, Acts 22? Do you understand that Jesus was a minister of the circumcision and Paul is a minister of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles? Those types of things. Prove them. And then watch them. You know, not a novice. Watch them in their lifestyle. How do they deal with other people? When stress comes into their life, how do they respond? Do they respond out of the flesh, which a lot of us do? Or do they, or is their first reaction to go back into doctrine and work out of the doctrine? Well, you know, you should be more reliant on the doctrine than your own flesh. 10 verse, let these also first be proved, and let them use the office of a deacon, being found blameless. Even so must their wives be grave, not slanderers. So now you're responsible for your wives, no gossip.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sober, again that's serious, faithful in all things. Let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children in their own house as well. The same issues we had with the bishop there. For they that have used the office of a deacon well, purchased to themselves a good degree and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. You were talking about a little issue of reward there earlier. Yeah, the deacons, the guys that show up and do the work. Now, and there's a lot of issues, which is which. A bishop seems to be an overseer, a deacon seems to be more of a worker. Yeah. I look at some of the things that we've done. You know, at the other church, Corey certainly was to be the bishop. He was the speaker. I think I fulfilled that role down here. The deacons, I think you're a great deacon. Mm-hmm. That's when I think of that, I think the perfect quintessential example of a deacon, of course, is who? Bill Walker. You know, when you needed something to do it would be amazing if you had to ask Bill to do it, because he'd probably already done it. He had probably done it before you knew it had to be done. You know,
Part of service.
Until
I wish that was me. Jennifer always has to tell me to do things.
Oh, you know what? You know, I tell you. And I'm very serious. You don't understand the great joy and freedom is for us to walk in and not have to load. I mean, for 6 months, 8 months, the whole church was April, and I had to go into storage and get down there and get set up and everything, and that's fine. I mean, it's work. It's the work of the ministry, and that's okay. I knew that, and we knew that going in. But
We never
but
grumbled about
no,
it.
you don't
but
grumble about it,
wow,
but
it is a blessing when you
yeah,
do.
to walk in and have it set up, or partially set up, even if for Tammy to come in and do the music, so I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to feel bad that we don't have music, because I am the world. I truly am a terrible singer, and but those things are just wonderful. You guys will find out this weekend because Tammy's not there, so I'm gonna have to sing this weekend,
No.
and so it'll
I think
be.
it's next weekend.
No, she's not there this week too.
Oh, just
And,
a week, okay.
But that issue of a deacon, and I really appreciate it. He says, "For they have used the office of a deacon well, purchased to themselves a good degree." I think there's an issue of reward there. As I read that verse, that's something done. It's of a heart of a servant to just show up and get things done. All I want to say about Bill, that conference down in Rockaway, I think we've been going about 20 years now. April and I helped the last 6 years. So that means for 14 years, Bill Walker did that thing all by himself.
Wow.
We would all just show up and it would be done, and we would all leave,
Wow.
and he would put it all away.
Wow.
And
Being set up for the conference.
everything. He would take all this stuff. He stored it, and he would be in his car all week. And he'd take it to church, and we'd set it up at church like we do here. And then he'd take it down. It would stay in his car. And then when we went to conference, he'd drive down. He had their family had to take 2 cars, and he'd get down there early and get everything set up. And then we'd go up and go, wow, this is great. And then we'd all leave, not knowing, not understanding all the time and the hours it spent setting it up. And he's turned that over to April and I now, but he's left us a very easy thing. Now he used to have to do all the contracts and everything. Now it just all we got to do is walk in and sign on the dotted line. It's all been set up for 20 years now, and it's no more thinking.
Is this the conference at the coast?
And at Rockaway, yeah. And we had one for 2 or 3 years up in Vancouver, and you kind of did a lot of that, and that was a lot of work. And hopefully we'll get a conference down here in the next year or two. But anyhow, I just want you to know that I do appreciate that issue of the deacon, and I do think there's an issue of reward there. I think the deacons that have used it well, and I think you have used it well, and I think Bill has used it well. And the other guy we had up there at the church was Byron. He did all the sound stuff behind the scenes and everything, and I do think there's that issue. And look what it says: well purchased to themselves a good degree and great boldness in the faith, which is in Christ Jesus.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I mean, doesn't it kind of imply to you that there was either transitional or this was a time where there was potential persecution? I mean, we don't have, boldness. Standing up preaching at a grace conference, that's not exactly a dangerous
Not physically
thing to
dangerous,
do.
you're right.
I mean, it kind of implies that Paul kept saying, "Pray for me that I would be bold."
Sure.
In Rome and stuff like that, and so I don't know. Maybe it implies there was persecution.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of these churches, Thessalonians were persecuted. Philippi, he's going to say, how I was persecuted. And we before we even started the book, we went and looked at what happened to Paul. Gets into Philippi, right? What's he do? He goes to jail almost immediately. And so that church was founded in persecution.
So you become a
Thessalonica
deacon, you could go to jail.
You could go to jail. You maybe part of your job being a deacon is standing at the door in case somebody you're coming to give the thing. Think about this. This is the one that always frustrated me at the church, because we always did Sunday school not during church because I wanted to be in church. If the role the deacon happens to be filling as a Sunday school teacher, be it for the kids especially, there's a good chance he's going to miss the adult sermon, if I can put it that way. Okay. That's using the office of a deacon well. That's an important thing to do, to teach children. It's an important thing to be in a service too in here, so you got to balance those things out. So there's a lot to that. But yeah, I think very much there was persecution here.
Well, but this too, kind of how I see it, and great boldness in the faith is that this is different from the law. And I mean, they're teaching grace here, and just being bold in that in teaching the mystery.
Mm-hmm. Sure. The more you immerse yourself in Paul's teachings and doing the things that Paul would have you to do, here we're talking about the way a deacon would do the things, is going to reinforce that doctrine, and it's going to reinforce that boldness. But one thing we all know, think about the first day that you understood the doctrine, the issues of right division, whatever part of it you understood that very first day, and you're so excited, and you go find somebody, and let me tell you, and they go, I don't care. And your boldness went away real quick. But now, after a couple of years, maybe you got more underpinning to it. You don't go grab somebody. You pick your opportunities, but you're more bold because you had a better understanding, you got a different way to approach it, and you don't get shut down with so much with a, well, I don't care.
One thing I've noticed in here, almost everyone comes in here, we're not in one accord.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, when you go down to church, we're all pretty much in one accord.
Mm-hmm.
But the people walk through here, cause just they're kind of like what we used to be.
Hmm.
I mean, it didn't matter what denomination. If you're right division, you're not included.
That's right.
And we kind of have an idea from Baptist to the Assemblies of God, whatever. We know we don't agree on all the different doctrines, but you kind of accept to a certain point.
Hmm.
But right division, that's so when people come in here, I mean, I just say they're mixing it all. I mean,
Yeah.
it's but I make my statements, and out of respect, most of them don't say anything, but I know they probably
Sure.
don't agree with me.
Sure. You
Well,
know, I
you
drew. You were down there Saturday. I drew the chart. Right, took 20 minutes and got that chart drawn. And I could look out, and people were nodding. They were not nodding where I wish they would have been nodding. But there were some people looking at me like, hey, "Are you? When we get to the music?" And some people are going, "Yeah, you're a bozo." I will tell you this too, like what we were saying about that. I think mainstream Christianity is more accepting of Mormonism than right division.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How sad is that?
Anything that's been around a long time, even
Or
Catholicism,
Catholicism, yeah.
Yeah.
and it's so far off.
Hmm. But you grace teachers, they're a bunch of heretics. You grace believers,
But I
you're a
want
bunch
to
of
say this
heretics.
about what you do, not to inflate your ego, and like you was talking about a while ago. I think you did a good job down there. And the thing of it is, I know for myself, it's hard to, because I'm not a good speaker. I mean, I don't like to get in front of people. But to stand up there like you did, and look back there, because we had people talking back at us, I couldn't hear
Yeah,
what
I
you
know.
said.
There was like.
And so I know that it's got to be discouraging to a point anyway, when maybe a big majority of them maybe are not paying attention and so on.
Well,
But you
yeah,
did good.
thank you. Yeah,
And I was just
we'll keep hitting them.
thinking, they had their opportunity to hear this and think about it, and they were ignoring it, and it just,
Well-
it'll go against them when they.
Next,
They've been inoculated against right division.
next time you ask me, well, see, I'm laying the groundwork.
Yeah, I
So
know you are.
yeah, next time we're next time we're gonna get them what Jesus said, Paul said, Jesus said, Paul said, Jesus said, Paul said. They're different,
Oh,
and then we'll see what they want.
I
think I should come hear
It won't be this. It won't be in May. It'll
Maybe
be in
we
June.
come down there wasn't for the same. It just
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm serious.
No, I know. I understand. Yeah, I
That
understand. We won't be there. Yeah, it is nice to have. It is wonderful to have. It's nice to look out and have a friendly
Yeah.
face. When we started the church, I didn't have any friendly faces. There were people that were happy to hear the message, but Bill Walker was there, and he was my security blanket. I could look out, and she laughs at all my jokes, and I appreciate that. Bill doesn't laugh at any of them, but I could look out, and people were still trying to figure out who is this guy, and I could see Bill, and Bill just. So, and when Bill had issues and he had to go,
April and Bill.
yeah, and but I even when I go places I don't know, I find people to look for, and like I said, I know where Richard and John are, and I don't look at them.
My problem is though, David, because I do that. I look for a friendly face, and sometimes I only see one. So I'm speaking to that one person, and that's I catch myself doing.
Yeah.
That. I know I shouldn't do that, and I think they probably feel uneasy.
Sure. And when I was down there were people nodding their heads when I would say certain things, and so I would key back on them because you want to move around. So
Well, and one thing too, Glenn, you're talking about sometimes talking to people and how there's just so many different denominations and so many different opinions. One thing you can always just talk about is just Christ and the cross. Because you don't want to start an argument. You don't want to get people all upset if they don't have the ears and the heart to hear it. But you can always talk about the cross.
that's what I tell you what that's what bothers me the most. Bill has not come to me and say, somebody really took issue with what you said. That tells me nobody's listening because there's people down there that don't agree with what I'm saying, and that's the best way to start a conversation. And when they're just nodding there in my head, Mary had an interesting thing. She said, more people would come if you talk slower. And I go, well, yeah, I hear that, but so maybe we'll try next time. But I got 20 minutes, and I'm going to try and draw the chart.
You're out of time right now.
Okay, let's finish this. Let's finish this here. Verse 15, verse 14. These things write unto thee, hoping to come unto thee shortly. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. He's writing these things. He's got more to say when he gets there, but you know what? If he doesn't get there, Timothy, this is what I want you to know, and this is how you need to behave in the church. Now, the church, he's talking about the local assembly here. The church is not a building, it's a local assembly. But he's saying this is the way a local assembly needs to be organized. And he says the other thing, the church is not a social club, it's not a music concert, it is the pillar and it is the ground of the truth. And that's what the church needs to be. And hopefully, I mean, you know, when I get up there on Sundays down there, and we've been talking about that, that's the goal, is to get up there and be the pillar and be the ground of the truth, not be this other stuff. There are lots of other places, you know, the worst thing I've ever heard, yeah, we go here because they have such great music. I just want to, I'd much rather hear him say, well, he's a great speaker. Okay, I can deal with that. I go there because the music's so good.
I don't care.
No. It's a verse everybody should remember. That the church, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. There's a lot of controversy about verse 16, so I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into it. We're going to end right there. That the church is a pillar and ground of the truth, and it is to have an organization. And even if you don't have those titles, you do know what the leaders in the group are supposed to look like. Now, the other thing, real quick, that's kind of my drive-by comment. You notice these issues, these leaders are men. The roles are men. And it's not mankind. When he talks about a wife, that means he's talking about a male. So...
Because
When he says that you have a wife, he's talking about a man.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
Not a male wife.
Right. A lot of people want to say, well, yeah, but it could be male or female. Well, he's very clear. If you're a bishop, you have to be the husband of one wife. That means you're a guy.
Pretty much. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and well, up until about 6 months ago or 6 years
I
ago.
just I thought I heard you say the opposite.
Oh.
Okay, we're leaving.
Yeah. All right, dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you for what you've written and the understanding that what the church is, that it is the pillar and it is the ground of the truth. It is where the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery, is to come from, where right division is to be taught, where the saints are to be edified, supported, lifted up, taught, so that they can go out into the local area and evangelize and preach your word, and your word rightly divided, and be ambassadors and preach that ministry of the cross, that reconciliation, Lord. That you're not imputing sin to the world today, but that anybody that will believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of your Son for their sins, you will save. We thank you for that and give you praise for your great wisdom. In your name, amen.
I would like to mention that Linda